Let's talk now to the Conservative MP to Lichfield. Michael Fabricant is with us now for his take on the US elections. Good to have your steer this morning, Michael.
Good morning, Anna.
Good morning. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've been looking at the pollsters throughout the course of the campaigning over in America. Now, yes, of course, Mr. Biden has had the lead, but we look back to the last election and we think, well, do we trust the polls?
Well, that's right. The YouGov poll, there is a YouGov America poll, currently has it that Biden will get 53.2% of the popular vote and 44.3% will go to Donald Trump. But the system in America is slightly odd, a bit like the British system, you could argue, is slightly odd in that it is the college votes that actually decide who's the president. And the analogy, I suppose, is this. The government that forms power in the United Kingdom is the one with the most MPs, basically, or the one that can do a deal when you get a coalition. How it works in the US, and of course it doesn't matter in Britain whether somebody wins with 51% of the vote or 99% of the vote, you're still the MP for the area.
Yeah.
Similarly, in the United States, it depends on the size of the state. So California has a whopping great 55 votes. New York State has 29 votes. Texas has 38 votes. And little Rhode Island ends up with about 3 votes.
Oh.
So it really depends on all that. So the bottom line is it's very, very complicated. And
Indeed.
so the swing votes in the swing states will count a lot, like Pennsylvania. And the other problem, by the way, I'm giving you all these problems, is that a lot of the votes won't even come in for a few days. So Ohio, you won't even get the result till Friday, November 13th.
What?
Because of postal votes.
So when will we know, like, cut and dried? I was expecting...
Could be Friday, November 13th if it's all equal. But here's the thing. I'm not sure that the polls are right. Because in Britain, we have a phenomenon called shy Tories. And these are people who will vote Conservative, but if they're asked by pollsters, they say, oh, I don't know, or I'll vote Lib Dem, or I'll vote Brexit, or whatever. But in the end, they do and will vote Conservative. Now, over the last few general elections, pollsters have been able to take that into account. There's never been a phenomenon in the United States, in my theory, up to now, of shy Republicans or shy Democrats, come to that. But I think Trump is such a divisive figure. I think that there's a fair number of people out there who will not want to admit they're going to vote Trump, but will indeed do that. But there is nothing being done in the United States, as far as I know, by any pollster to take that into account, because they have to use past data to compare and contrast with their projections and what actually happened. And that's never happened before. So it's going to be very difficult. And I think there's everything to play for on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a really good theory. It's one that I totally agree with. There will be people who are sort of sitting on their opinions quite closely. But from what I'm given to understand, the polls done from pollsters, where somebody actually talks to you and you might be a little bit shy, a bit reluctant to come forward about your views, will they actually match the online polls? Now, of course, they're anonymous. So the online polls are showing the same thing. So perhaps Trump won't have an upsurgence of votes in that sense, although, of course, it's difficult to tell, isn't it?
Well, we have online polls, of course, in the UK as well, and there's still the shy Tory phenomenon because people don't trust, that they're really anonymous, that, you can use the IP number of the computer to find out who you are. So you still get that phenomenon in the UK. It'd be interesting to see whether it still is in the US.
We'll find out.
It's going to be a fascinating election, but whether we get a result by tomorrow, well, as I say, we could all be waiting. And I noticed that in the US, they're now a lot of places, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C., people are boarding up their windows in shopping areas because they think there's going to be riots and goodness knows what else.
Goodness me. And to what extent do you think this pandemic is playing into this election? Of course, it's very novel in any sense to have an election during, a global pandemic. But the handling of it has been,
hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely, because before the pandemic, Trump was absolutely leading in the polls. But now, of course, the view is that he's behaved well, the view of Democrats anyway, and I would suggest most people, he's behaved irresponsibly, not choosing to admit that a pandemic exists. And then he had that extraordinary thing where he, of course, got the COVID himself and was in the hospital, and then emerged from hospital totally contagious, with some poor driver in the car and Secret Service men with him to drive around to wave at all his supporters. So a lot of people feel he's handled it very badly indeed.
There are some people who say, well, Trump's going to be a sore loser. So let's just say that Biden does, come out on top. Do you think he'll fight it in the courts? Do you think he'll find a reason to dispute the outcome?
Well, yes, possibly, because the system in the US is, they're very proud in America of the fact that the states have considerable power. That was the whole thing way back in the 1780s when the British decided not to continue with the Revolutionary War with them. And they had to decide their constitution. And the constitution, in the end, the reason why they became a United States was because the states have huge power. Yeah. That means that the voting system in each state is completely different. So some states, they vote in exactly the same way as we do in the UK. In other states, they use voting machines. Some of you may remember the hanging Chad phenomenon in Florida a few years back, where you use a punch hole thing and the holes weren't punched through properly.
Yep.
So basically, there's lots of things to argue about in court if he wanted to.
Exciting times. Will you be staying up for that result, or is there no point because you'd be, staying up until the 13th?
I may be staying up until the 13th. Who knows? It could be a nail biter, this one.
Absolutely. Well, come back and talk to us again on that point. Michael, thank you for your thoughts this morning. That is the Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Exciting day for political aficionados everywhere.